You walk into the store, same place you've been going for years. You grab a cart, head straight to the meat section. And without thinking too much about it, you pick what looks fresh. Good color, clean packaging, maybe even on sale, and you move on. Because to most people, meat is simple. You buy it, you cook it, you eat it. But what if I told you that the place you're buying your meat from might matter more than the meat itself? Now stay with me for a moment. Because this isn't about fear. It's about understanding something most people never question. And once you see it, you won't look at the meat section the same way again. Across Canada, food systems are heavily regulated. There are standards, inspections, processes designed to ensure safety, and that's a good thing. But here's where it gets interesting. Because regulation doesn't mean every store operates the same way. It doesn't mean every piece of meat you see has been handled, stored, or processed in the same way. And it definitely doesn't mean you're always getting the best option. Now think about this. Between 2020 and 2023, food prices across Canada rose significantly. People started looking for deals, discounts, lower prices, and grocery stores responded. More promotions, more value packs, more ways to make things look affordable. But here's the question most people don't ask. What's behind that price? Because when something gets cheaper, something else usually changes. Not always obvious, not always visible, but real. And this is where the story begins to shift. Because what you're really buying isn't just meat. You're buying a system, a process, a chain of decisions made long before that package reached the shelf. And not all systems are built the same. Now this is where most people start to lean in a little closer, because up to this point, everything still feels normal. You go to a store, you see meat, you assume it's all handled the same way, but it's not. And this is where things begin to separate, because not every store treats meat the same, even under the same regulations in Canada. Now think about how most large grocery chains operate. They move volume, a lot of it. Daily shipments, constant restocking, fast turnover. And on the surface, that sounds like a good thing. More supply, more options, lower prices. But here's the part most people don't think about. When you're moving that much product, speed becomes everything. And when speed becomes the priority, handling becomes different. Now I want you to picture this. A large distribution system. Meat being transported, processed, packaged, shipped, displayed, sometimes across long distances, all within a system designed for efficiency, not necessarily for quality. And again, this doesn't mean it's unsafe, but it does mean something important. There are levels to how meat is handled, and those levels are not always visible to you standing at the shelf. Now compare that to smaller scale operations, local butchers, independent shops, even certain grocery stores that prioritize in-house preparation. The volume is lower. The handling is different. The time from preparation to display can be shorter. And suddenly, you're not just buying meat anymore. You're buying how that meat was treated before it reached you. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Because during the period between 2021 and 2023, as costs increased across Canada, many large retailers had to adapt. Margins tightened, supply chains became more expensive, operations had to stay efficient. And when businesses adapt under pressure, they make decisions. Sometimes those decisions are invisible to the customer, but they still affect the product. Now again, this is not about saying one place is bad. This is about understanding something deeper. Not all value is equal. A lower price doesn't always mean a better deal, and a higher price doesn't always guarantee better quality either. So the real question becomes, what are you actually getting? Because once you start asking that, you begin to see patterns. You notice differences, and you stop choosing based only on what's in front of you, and start thinking about what's behind it. Now here's where most people make a mistake. They assume the only thing that matters is price. But when it comes to food, especially something as important as meat, there's more at play. Freshness, handling, storage conditions, turnover speed, all of these factors shape what you end up bringing home. And once you understand that, you start making different decisions. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Now stay with me, because we're about to get into the part most people never hear. Not what's wrong, but what actually works. And this is where things begin to change completely. Now this is the part most people never hear. Because after all the confusion, all the different opinions, all the focus on price, people are left asking one simple question: so where should I actually buy my meat? And the answer is not as simple as naming one store. Because it's not just about where, it's about what to look for. Now stay with me here, because this is where everything begins to make sense. The people who consistently get better quality don't just shop differently, they observe differently. They pay attention to things most people walk right past. Now next time you're in a store, I want you to slow down for just a second. Look at the meat section and ask yourself a few quiet questions. How does it look? Not just color, but consistency. Are the cuts uniform, or do they look rushed and uneven? Now look at the packaging. Is it tight and clean, or is there excess liquid pooling inside? Because that detail alone can tell you a lot about handling and storage time. Now watch this. Look at the turnover. Is the section constantly being restocked, or does it look like items have been sitting there, waiting? Because freshness isn't just about dates, it's about movement. And this is where smaller, more focused operations often stand out. Not because they're perfect, but because their system is different. Less volume, more attention, more control over how things are handled day to day. Now here's another detail most people miss. Staff knowledge. Walk up to the counter, ask a simple question. Where is this from? When did it come in? And watch the response. Because in places where quality matters, the answer is usually clear, confident, immediate, and that tells you something. Now let's connect this back to what's been happening in Canada over the past few years. Between 2020 and 2023, as prices increased and pressure grew, consumers started changing. They became more aware, more selective. Not everyone, but enough to shift demand. And when demand shifts, businesses respond. That's why you're starting to see more local sourcing labels, fresh prepared sections, smaller batch offerings. Not because it's trendy, but because people are beginning to ask better questions, and that changes the entire system over time. Now here's the key insight most people miss. The best option is not always the most obvious one. It's not always the biggest store. It's not always the cheapest option. It's the place where the process aligns with what you value. And once you start thinking that way, your choices change. You stop reacting and start selecting. Now at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I understand what to look for. But there's still something important we haven't addressed. Because even with all this information, most people still fall into one trap, one mindset that keeps them stuck. And once you see it, you'll understand why so many people keep making the same mistake without even realizing it. Now here's the trap, the one most people don't even realize they're in. They shop on autopilot. Same store, same habits, same quick decisions. Not because they've thought it through, but because it's familiar. And when something becomes familiar, it stops being questioned. Now think about that for a moment. How many times have you walked into the same store, reached for the same product, and never once asked, is this actually the best option for me? Not the cheapest, not the most convenient, the best. Because that's the shift this whole conversation is pointing toward. From automatic to intentional. Now let's bring everything together. Yes, Canada has strong food safety systems. Yes, there are regulations in place to protect consumers. And yes, most of what you see on the shelf is safe to eat. But safe and optimal are not always the same thing, and that's what most people don't realize. Because when a system is designed for scale, for efficiency, for consistency across thousands of locations, it has to make trade-offs. Not dangerous trade-offs, but practical ones. Speed over precision, volume over attention, uniformity over individuality. And that's not a flaw, it's how large systems work. But once you understand that, you begin to see where your choices come in. Because you're not just a buyer, you're a selector. And every time you choose where to shop, you're choosing a system. Now here's where it gets powerful, because once people start becoming more intentional, the entire market begins to respond. Better sourcing. Better handling, more transparency, not overnight, but gradually. And this is something we've already started to see across Canada in recent years. More local options, more awareness, more conversations around quality, not just price. And that shift starts with individuals. People who stop moving on autopilot and start paying attention. Now, this doesn't mean you need to overcomplicate everything. It doesn't mean every purchase has to be perfect. It simply means this: be aware of what you're choosing. Because once you see the system behind the product, you can't unsee it. And that awareness alone changes how you move. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed a difference between where you buy your meat? Or is it something you've never really thought about before? Drop your answer below, because your experience might open someone else's eyes. And if you want more breakdowns like this, the kind that take everyday things and reveal what's really behind them, stay with me, because there's a lot happening in plain sight that most people never stop to question.